Good morning and thank you for staying with Morning Express. My name is Sophia Wanuna. It is time for Person of Interest, a segment that we have every Tuesday, and we seek to bring people that we deem to be of interest to you, especially the man that we're hosting this morning. He is the Senior Advisor to the President on the Constitution and Legal Affairs, and there have been some sticky issues in the past, including the most recent around the teachers and the directive by the court that the government pay the teachers, and of course the President saying there simply is no money. So there are many people who simply question why is the executive disregarding a court order. So we'll talk about that and of course other areas, but as always is the case here on Morning Express and on the Person of Interest, we start by getting to know our guest a little bit. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. It's a pleasure to host you.
Thank you.
So for those who don't know, and I don't for sure, where were you born, where did you grow up and go to school?
Excellent. I come from Mandera County, small town about 80 kilometers west of Mandera called Ramu. That's where I did my primary school. Did my secondary school at Alliance, about 22 kilometers from here at in Kikuyuni, Kikuyu. Then I did my high school back home, 2 years high school. It was the last lot of the former system. Then University of Nairobi for my LLB. Practiced with a noisy man called Ahmed Nasir for some time. Then did a master's at Harvard. Went back into practice. Then ran for office in 2007. Did 5 years as a member of parliament for a constituency called Mandera Central, which no longer exists. So it was split in two. And decided a few months before the elections not to run for another term.
Why was that?
Well, I think I had done 5 years, not a short time, first of all. 5 years. If you look, you did your secondary schooling, now these days 4 years.
But in politics, 5 years is almost like 5 minutes. That's why some people want to hold on to it.
Actually, 5 minutes is like 5 years.
Could be, yes.
Yes, but yes, I thought 5 years was long enough. That's what I had thought of even from the word go. And I think I had done reasonably substantive stuff, and I didn't think I would improve on that. And also I didn't think I was going to give Mandera is not very close, and I live in Nairobi, and serving a very far rural constituency is very tough. So I thought they needed somebody probably who would be closer home.
You did not want to relocate?
It's very difficult to recruit. A member of parliament has essentially 3 jobs in one. Because most of the parliamentary staff is here. Most of the stuff you do for constituencies is here, but you also have constituency work. But so that distance, the fact that I didn't think I would have much more in terms of what I would offer the constituency, and in terms of the challenge, I thought it would be a good thing to look for another challenge in life moving forward. So once I decided I was not running, President Kibaki, most people don't know, but President Kibaki was the first president I advised, not President Kenyatta.
Oh really?
Yes. So once he knew I was not running, he said, look, why don't you help with the transition in terms of the legal transition from the old system. So for about 3 months, I was advising, after now Parliament was disbanded, advising President Kibaki on the legal stuff, helped with the assumption of office, did the legal work for the assumption of office committee. Then put in my name for speakership of the House, and then decided to not to pursue it at the last minute, and advised the President on legal stuff since then. So
you decided not to pursue because there was already the offer to get into Uhuru's administration?
No, that was part of the discussion. There were 3 candidates. You remember myself, current Speaker of the National Assembly, and the former Speaker of the Assembly, Honorable Marende. And I was then on the PNU general side, and therefore on the Jubilee side, and therefore would have 2 candidates from that side as opposed to Speaker Marende. So the political discussion was then that we would be picking from the same lot, and therefore politically speaking it might be better to have 1 candidate instead of 2. So that's how those discussions went through, yes.
Okay, so Harvard, amazing stuff in terms of school. Growing up all that while, what did you want to become? Because politics then, now here you are advising.
Not politics and not law.
What is it you wanted though?
I was interested in business. I was.
Were your parents business people?
Yes, yes. I mean, my parents were pastoralists and business. Almost any Somali is a business person.
Yeah.
Generally speaking. So yes, but if you had asked me, say 8 months before the election, whether I would be running, I'd have told you no.
So what was
the decision? The decision to run was like 6 months to the elections, the last time, and mainly because a number of us were interested in contributing, bring some change, stuff like that. And the more we talked, the more people said, look, enough with the talking. Somebody has to do this stuff if there is going to be some change necessary. And I was a lawyer, so they thought, you know, you will not be fired, or you can go back if you
and you can hold your own.
You can head back to the farm. In fact, I remember one of my old clients coming to me and saying, look, you're going to politics, are you sure? And I was telling him, in 6 months I'll either be in the house or I'll be back to the office, so let's talk in 6 months time. So yes, I wasn't planning to be a lawyer. I absolutely wasn't planning to be a politician.
Yeah, but it was a good run. What would you say was your most successful thing you did when you were a member of parliament that you're most proud of?
The Katiba, absolutely. It was moved by a motion that I moved. So that was an
huge
absolute moment. It was, and it's not just one event. It was really a whole process, and it was an honor. That's unbelievable. As fairly young in parliamentary terms those days, I was a first termer. Many of the people who had headed that committee before me were presidential candidates, who people who had done many years as members of parliament or as ministers. Former Prime Minister Raila, former Minister Nyachai, many such fellows. So because there are 5 versions of the committee I was heading before my stint, and so it was interesting. Actually, we did vie for the chairmanship with the current deputy president when we were running. Yes,
when you're running.
Yes.
And that constitution, Kenya overwhelmingly voting for
Absolutely.
And now you're advising the president on the constitution, ensuring he remains within the legal confines. However, there's those who wonder, we just celebrated 5 years since its promulgation. Is the spirit of the constitution still there, or has it been diluted? Because we've seen a lot of things and activity around the law. Has it been diluted? Is it still the same one we passed?
Yes, I would like to say 2 things. First of all, we have done, there's a huge transition that's going on. Most people don't focus on it. If you remember 5 years ago, or slightly more than 5 years ago, we didn't have a Supreme Court, we didn't have a Senate, we didn't have county governments. There is so much stuff that has changed that most people, because it is obviously normal and going through, people don't focus on it. So substantial work has been done. The constitution is work in progress. The implementation of the constitution is work in progress. There are things we have done incredibly well. There are things we have done very badly at.
Like what? What have we done badly?
Chapter 6, for example. We are basically bure kabisa when it comes to
it what is getting us to this hate speech, this type of leadership?
Part of it, yes. Part of it is because it's also difficult to implement. So, for example, vetting. That is one of the prescriptions of the constitution to try and address that issue. How do you vet, for example, the judiciary or members of the police force, or even politicians? So it's very difficult to actually vet politicians before they come into office. That is a role that's meant for the public. But also our institutions have not done very well, and we have not done much in terms of that chapter. And then obviously there are certain hiccups with the drafting in terms of the Katiba that at least need to be. But broadly speaking, by and large, I consider we are the most democratic of countries, from Cape Town to Cairo on the African coast.
Really?
Absolutely. That's my view. We have paid high prices. We have done quite a bit of work. Tanzania just did an elections. the rest of the region is going for changing presidential terms, for example. Quite a number of countries. That would be unheard of in this country. It just will not happen.
But there have been, you know, those who have claimed that steps and moves have been made to curtail freedoms and spaces. You just had what Uhuru had to say, even as far as the media is concerned, that the government is seen not to be too happy with those who are dissenting. They want to clamp down on that space.
Absolutely, and that's true. You see, in politics and even in business, there are ebbs and flows. There is push. Usually, most things in the constitution is not mainly, generally speaking, except for the Bill of Rights, ABCD, it's not about right and wrong. It's about this way or the other. So for example, you would have people who are on the opposite side, not because they are wrong, but because they have a view and you have a view, and generally the country goes with the one side. That's true for court cases generally also. But so for example, ours is a very progressive constitution. There are people who would have gone for a very conservative constitution. On the issue of the press freedom, the constitution is very clear. There are those in the administration who would not go for that far, who would have a conservative. In fact, the security laws probably would be the best example. When it comes to security, the issue we'll be discussing with you later is about presidential veto. There are those who feel Parliament has taken too much, or we have opened up the security sector to too much scrutiny, and would push back to say no. For us to secure the country, for us to really have a fight against terrorism, we really need to push back on liberties. So the push between liberty and security is a pendulum, and it goes one way and the other, and usually what you're looking for is somewhere in the middle. Not because security is bad or liberty is bad, but because whoever is giving the opinion is colored by where they stand.
It depends on where you stand and how you see it.
Where you stand. There are those who feel without security you can't have liberty. There are those who feel without liberty security is even why do you need security if you have no liberty to exercise here? So it's really that, and therefore there are those who are fairly hardline and conservative. There are those who are fairly progressive and on the other side, and generally it is on who the people elect.
And trying to figure that balance. We will get into some of the specific issues that we've seen, you know, bring about some criticism in terms of the executive. But let's begin with your title. So you're the Senior Advisor, Constitutional and Legal Affairs. So what is your JT?
Good question. Absolutely, good question. And that's one of the things that's unseen in the transition from the old system to the new, and one of the things we haven't done very well, by the way, is we were in a system which was essentially borrowed from the British, which is what was called the Westminster Constitution. Essentially a parliamentary setup. A parliamentary setup where Parliament is both the executive and the legislature. It's the executive in the sense that the Prime Minister is first a member of Parliament, and then he is the head or the leader of the largest party in Parliament. And then you have a public service that is essentially Parliament is supreme, and everybody else, you know, the rest of the body politic and the public service flows from there. Now the African countries took independence. They didn't like that very much, many of the African countries, because the African presidents were big men who wanted to be elected directly. So they decided, over and above being a prime minister or whatever, I'm going to be elected. So they went for election. So you had a fused system that came in, where you had a president who was elected, but you had a parliamentary system. So what we had was a mongrel, which is essentially a fused parliamentary and presidential, slightly presidential. So that's how our system was until we had a new constitution, in which case we went completely opposite and went for a presidential system, which is now the presidency completely separate from Parliament, and you have the executive not in the House, you have ministers who are not members of Parliament, and we really have not yet gotten used to that. If you ask our members of Parliament, they are not happy with ministers who are outside Parliament. Very many Kenyans liked the ministers who are politicians, you know, the regional strongmen who you would go to if you had issues, as opposed to the technocrat who really doesn't understand maybe what you're talking about. They do understand, but so in the presidency, same is true. Before we used to have the president, the office of president, a PS in the presidency, or a minister, the OP, a PS in the OP,
yeah,
and a whole bureaucracy in the OP.
Right.
Now you no longer have that.
Okay.
You have no minister in the OP. You know, there is no minister in the office of the president.
So your role then becomes...
So your role then becomes, how does the president operate? Because now the president is also to operate from, the president's decisions are supposed to be made, his processes are more formal. The constitution requires a president who is really in charge of and running stuff, as opposed to a president who is fairly closed and you hear about him once in a while, you don't know how he or she works. So that requires a certain technical capacity around the president, so that the president's decisions are, so you have then the presidency lacking, for want of a better example, the White House in the US, which has substantial departments that do quite a bit of technical work. So that's now how the technical support to the president comes in, whether it is in law or in economics or in politics or in any of the other fields. So
in essence, the president will not sign any bill or any legal action or any pronouncement without talking to you? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Not correct, because the president has very many advisors, including the cabinet secretary. In fact, if you look at the definition of a cabinet secretary, is to advise the president in running a particular department. So the president has very many roles. He is the chair of the cabinet, for example. There is a cabinet office to handle that stuff. He is the chair of the National Security Council. You have the National Security Council and the secretariats they are under, and to handle that. He has political staff.
So there's many people.
So there's many people.
So you're not the only person when it comes to legal, but he does talk to you.
Absolutely. Once in a while he does.
Once in a while. What about when you feel that you need to put in a word?
Yes, I do. I do, and and the president is very open-minded. The president has no problem with changing his mind if he thinks it makes a good idea. He has his own very strong views also on many issues. He is a very experienced fellow. President was a long-serving member of parliament. He was head of the opposition one time.
He's played this game for a while.
Politics, he was the finance minister, he was trade minister, he was local governments minister, he was chair of the public accounts committee at one time when the leasing thing came up. So president knows how this stuff works.
Let's start with some of the issues we've seen in the recent past in as far as the legality of them or lack of it. The teachers dispute, pay dispute. So the court comes and says pay the teachers. And you know, the Teacher Service Commission had been engaging with the unions, and then the president comes and says no, we're not going to pay. I mean, and they had their side of the argument. But from Kenyans' point of view, very many came out and said the court has ruled. You do not get to decide whether you're going to obey or not, because then if that happens, we get into anarchy. So why did the president choose not to?
That's very true. So let's go back to, first of all, the teachers' conflict has had a long, actually let me start from this. Court orders must be obeyed, whether you like them or not.
And that's what I want us to dwell on, because the teachers issue has had a long history. But now the court had summed it all up, all that history with the directive.
Let's start from there. That is not in doubt, is not in question. Court orders must be obeyed. And you will see that in the president's speeches a number of times, including him saying the reason why I'm going to the Hague is because I'm obeying a court order. You know, he went all the way to the Hague himself. But let's come to the teachers matter. The teachers issue has been dragging for a very long time, and very hotly contested, and that is an exceptionally good institution in terms of playing its adversarial role. It's not a pushover, I can assure you. They know their game very well, and they have the best legal services. But this dispute was between the teachers and the TSC. That most people don't get. They assume that, so for example, if it was the IPOA or CIC, the dispute is between NAT and the Teacher Service Commission. Legally speaking now, pure legalese. So if it is a party to the suit, the presidency, the president or the national executive is not a party to that suit. It is the president, it is the TSC, it is NAT. Who are the parties to this suit? NAT and TSC. If there is a party that is in breach of court orders, it can either be NAT or TSC. Number one. Number two, and purely speaking as a lawyer now, not if you realize NAT was saying you must not appeal, we will not obey any court orders if you appeal, if you go to court. But that's for NAT's lawyers and TSC's lawyers to haggle over. there is no time the president was told, you as the president of the republic, this is an order from the court for you to obey this court order, and the president has not obeyed. If it is TSC disobeying a court order or not disobeying a court order, that is for those parties and their income.
But it sounds like this is a convenient separation of issues, because at the end of the day,
it sounds like legalese, and I agree.
Yes,
but
because
that is
to
the
ordinary Mwananchi, the president refused to pay the teachers. So where do you, because now it's
for ordinary Mwananchi, what's important is this. Teachers are very important, a very, very important segment of our society. But philosophically speaking, my religious grounding, you obey God, you obey your parents, and then teachers are next in terms of ranking for whatever. So teachers are, you and I are here because teachers taught us.
Correct.
So I think that is absolutely given. Number two, we have a big problem with our wage bill, and the teachers are the largest chunk of our wage earning populace.
Correct. And the court knew about this, because the issue becomes all those, and I do not want us to try the matter here, because for sure I'm not as good a lawyer as you are. But they're still in court also. And they're still in court. So the issue is that all those issues were canvassed. What the president and what the government was saying, the teachers argued that these are issues and submissions that should be made in court. What they cared about at the time is there's this direction that has been given, pay the teachers. And when the president comes out and says, people need to realize what times we are working in, do we then have a conversation about what times they're working in or what situation, when there is a very clear court order?
Now if we focus on the court order, we have to focus on the legalese. So if we're going to focus on the broad issue, because really it's a big, very complex thing. So for example, the perception that this went to the labor court, then went to the Court of Appeal, the Labour Court is at the High Court level, went to the Court of Appeal, then went to the Supreme Court, and all those courts said pay the teachers, and the TSC is disobeying, is not correct. The Supreme Court, for example, never went into the case, said, look, we don't have jurisdiction, send this back to where it's coming. The Court of Appeal was being asked for a stay order, hold this, and said, we'll give the stay on this condition. Now what the TSC was saying, if we obey that condition, then we have no case. The condition you are saying is pay these guys for the time being and then come back to court. So what happens when I come back? If I win, do we stop the payment from being done? Do we rewind? How do you give 300,000?
But do you consider the language, especially from the presidency at the time, was one that appeared not to be interested at all in obeying that ruling? Because yes, there were those situations and what the government was experiencing in the wage bill, as you've talked about. There would have been a language of let's see it. Yes, the court has said this, but this is the honest, real situation. It was more of they've said I don't care, I'm not paying.
No, not really, absolutely, and that certainly wasn't instead. The issue was, for a long time, this thing had been everybody jumping on it. Can we let the parties litigate, because this matter is in court now, and can everybody else take a step back so that we see what this is going to. The legal process, and I'll ask you to get any lawyer, is very jumbled. Justice Abuada, and he's a good friend of mine, the judge, his ruling is on one side, the Court of Appeals issues on the other side, the High Court is on the other side, the Supreme Court is on the other side. Whether the first basis of this is not even agreed on, whether the 1997 deal was concluded or not, there is a whole lot of legal dust flying in the air. But bottom line, two things: the teachers are a very critical and important sector, and number two, court orders must be obeyed irrespective.
So you're saying it's the TSC, not
it is the TSC
president,
that's a party to this, not the president. There is no time the president of the republic was.
But you also understand that the perception to because Kenyans voted the president in.
Yes, I understand.
The perception is that had he.
I understand. Number one, the perception is that actually it is the presidency or the executive that's not obeying a court order. That perception is perverse. It's not just you asking that. That is actually what many Kenyans think. But that is a failure on communication, as opposed to the actual. Is a really perception issue as opposed to the actual reality. Because there is no order. The president obeyed a court order to go to the Hague, and temporarily had to step away from his seat. Yes. All
right. We'll also open our phone line so that we can get our viewers calling in. We also want to listen to an up sound that the president, what he had to say after a terror attack. Director, if you have it, please let's play it, and then we'll continue the conversation.
Further direct the Inspector General of Police to take urgent steps and ensure that the 10,000 recruits whose enrollment is pending promptly report for training at the Kenya Police College in Kiganjo. I take full responsibility for this directive.
All right, so the president there, again, directing recruits report to training. There was a court order barring the same from happening. And then we hear him talk about personal responsibility. Talk to Kenyans who at the time were like, what is this?
That's true. That's true. It didn't happen though.
It did not happen. Did he make a mistake?
Well,
was that a concession that, you know what, I shouldn't have said that, that's why nothing happened?
Bottom line, the way our system works, the courts have a final say on interpretation of the law, and all court orders must be obeyed, irrespective of whether you think they are right, and they could very well be wrong, by the way. But for our system to work, court orders must be obeyed. If you have an issue with it, you appeal.
So there was one in place, but the president still came out in view and in full knowledge of the same, and said that. So he was in essence disregarding that order.
In the sense that that wasn't implemented. The court order still stayed.
Implementation is a different, the fact that it was there and he came out well knowing that it's there. Implementation is because then there was pressure, there was outrage that why is the president coming to give a direction that's against a standing court order. So at the time he gave this press conference, he was in the breach of law, wasn't he?
No, because I think the court order must stand, and the court order did stand. The court order said X, Y wasn't done. The court order stayed. Interpretation, what he said, what went into his speech, Sophia, that's all important. But bottom line, court orders must be obeyed, and it doesn't matter whether you like the court order, the court that gave, or whether you actually think it's complete.
As his advisor, say he comes to you moments before
that is the advice I
such
give.
a statement. Did you tell him, sir, it's okay, you can tell Kenyans this, you can give this directive, and there is this order? Because that is what somebody then will wonder, where you roll.
Absolutely. Now, and in that sense, I'm a little bit handicapped, because really I can say what I advised or I didn't advise, or when I advised or when I didn't advise, because that comes with discretion. It's not.
But would you allow for your client, let's put it now, client, go give something against what you know would be against the law? Would you allow for that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, that's what I'm telling you. When it comes to court orders, and I can send you speeches where the president himself says that it doesn't matter whether I like the court, or I like the court order, or I think it's right, or I don't think it's right. It is the court order, period. You must obey it. Because that's the way the system works. That's the way the system works. And in terms of, because the whole thing of who has advised or misadvised usually comes up very much. Unfortunately, the role is such that I am not at liberty to decide to say I advised here, or I didn't advise here, or I was present here, or I wasn't present here.
But you would not advise your client to
I absolutely would not. I would not advise.
Would
court orders are court orders, and they must be obeyed. And that is not just what I say, it is what the law is, it's what the president has said many times.
So in essence, the president after that realized perhaps it was a mistake. That is why it was not implemented, correct?
No comment on that, but no comment on that. But I'll tell you, the president takes his law very seriously. The president is very experienced, was a very experienced legislator. He's been in this position for quite a bit of time in terms of the national leadership. We take the constitution and the laws very seriously. The president was elected, stayed out of office for all those days because we were waiting for a court process to conclude. The president could easily would have wanted very many ministers, has to abide by the number of ministers. The constitution says you must do this. Many times you have to do things not because you like them, but because the law says. I can assure you we have those debates very seriously.
All right.
Yes.
Then there was the time, when we have the Judicial Service Commission and the president appointing a tribunal to investigate them, and the High Court came out and nullified that tribunal.
I like the fact about they have done their bit. Now, good point, good question. So then let me tell you what happened there. Let me tell you what happened there. We had two contradicting decisions from the two other arms. You have Parliament doing a resolution of the House saying do X. We had the court sending us do Y. on something both of them had mandate on. So for example, Parliament has a legitimate mandate to fire commissioners, to be part of the process of firing commissioners. And the JSC is a commission, albeit a very important commission. And then you have the court saying we are giving an injunction for the firing. Now that is the situation that we were faced with. You are damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you went with Parliament, the court will be very unhappy. If you went with the court, Parliament will be very unhappy. So we decided let's go with Parliament. Then the court moved thereafter, and then we said okay, then let's go with because. And
when talking of Parliament, you could look at it this way: that Parliament is in essence, majority is from the government side, so it's going with yourself in a sense.
Yes and no, but because Parliament is also Parliament. Parliament is.
But it's a thin line right now.
No, it's a huge line. That's why separation of powers comes through. That's what the question we're going to go into later is really about that. And we have had major constitutional fights with Parliament ourselves too. So Parliament. And it's very conceivable that tomorrow you would have a president on one party and Parliament's majority on the other party. So the rules have to apply. Parliament, when it acts as Parliament, when it passes laws, those are not Jubilee laws. Okay, in terms of politics, you could call it, but those are laws of the Republic of Kenya.
Okay.
So Parliament acted in one form, the judiciary acted in the other form. For me personally, and this is me speaking to you as a person, I would have hoped the court waits for the action to conclude and then act. So for example, the courts oftentimes jump into a process before it is concluded, whether it is
impeachment,
whether it's impeachment or ABCD. It would have been better, actually it is better, actually it's more appropriate when you conclude the process and then the court can come in at the end. So when the process went through and the court gave, before the process went through, a decision, and then the process went through, the president was faced with two decisions from the other two arms of government, no more serious institution in the country, the judiciary and Parliament, and he had to move. So he agreed with Parliament on the first instance, then the court gave a second instance and he agreed with the court the second time.
So what then do you say?
So none of the arms really clothed themselves in glory in that sense. We all of us really didn't do very well. The executive, the legislature and the judiciary.
So you take blame?
Yes, absolutely. That was not our best moment.
And also talk about Lamu, for instance, when the president came and pronounced that, with immediate effect, the titles have been revoked.
Yes.
And those who came out and said he doesn't have power to do that. After that, of course, we saw some action around NLC coming out.
No, actually before that.
Yes.
Because that I knew what the process was. That was a very close working link between NLC and the ministry. The president was giving, because the president is also the head of state. You see,
he is.
Yes.
It's like him coming out to say, "I now order so and so to be arrested." Would you then, in that particular case,
no,
say?
No, absolutely. And if you look at the wording, it was not "I revoke." It wasn't. You can look at how it came through. That was very clearly calibrated. It was a big problem. It was NLC, it was the Ministry of Lands, and it was the president saying, these are my policies as the president, and this is my view as the head of state. And these institutions were very much part of the process. In fact, NLC actually produced a report, very clear report that went through quite a bit of work in Lamu. So that was very well done. That
said with immediate effect, I order revocation of the title. So with everyone listening to that would assume that then
no, he hadn't said that. I will challenge you to look at it, because that was very well calibrated. We knew where the president's powers lay.
Because again, at the time there was a prog about is he overstepping his mandate?
No, he wasn't.
NLC.
No, he wasn't. And in fact, the NLC doesn't take lightly to their mandate. That's why they have these huge fights with the Ministry of Lands. The NLC would make a lot of noise if they felt this was our work and it was being taken over. That is the fight they had with Madam Gillu when she was minister. That's the fight they have with Minister Matiang'i right now.
Right now. And court is going to court. I think they already have on a number of bills. So the public audit bill, retirement benefits, central bank information and communication, public procurement and disposal, and others. And the argument really here is whether these bills on their validity, should they be annulled, are they null and void now, because they argue when they were presented to the president, whether he assented or declined to assent, that he's taking on himself a legislative role. That does he have that power in that he's supposed to issue a memorandum with either his reservations or whatever, but then there's cases of deleting certain words, adding certain words. Is that correct?
Good point. So let's go to the whole stuff of veto and
right.
There is no legislation without the president acting or not acting, acting by commission or omission, let's say. So legislation is not just the purview of the legislator. The president has a role in legislation. So for example, you can't have a bill if you don't send it for assent. If you can't have an act if you don't send it for...
So he has a role.
He must have a role, and without him there is no law.
What is that role then?
Thank you. So let's start from there. So for example, Parliament, the Senate and the National Assembly or the county assemblies cannot decide we have written this law, we are not sending it to the president, now it's a law. Not possible. So the president has a role.
Yes.
And it's not just the president, it's also Parliament having a role in the executive side.
Right.
So we're talking about separation of powers, but checks and balances. Checks and balances because one institution is given some bit of work in the other institution's function. The president can't appoint his ministers and say they become ministers because I have appointed them.
Right.
Parliament has to have an approval. The JSC cannot say we have appointed the Chief Justice. Parliament and the executive have to have a role. Parliament approves, the president appoints. So each of these institutions is interlinked and has its mandate. And they're supposed to check and balance each other. So let's go to the veto.
Yes.
What exactly is the president's role in the veto? What the Constitution says in Article 115 is when Parliament passes a bill, it sends it to the president for assent. And the president has two options: to assent or not to assent and send back the bill with his reservations. Now, how do those reservations... Now, the complaint, and without going into the case, I think the best thing is to discuss what Parliament itself has said, because not Parliament going. What exactly, because that controversy has been to Parliament. What did Parliament itself, and both houses by the way, what did Parliament itself say? In June of this year, Honorable Member for Ariada took this matter to Parliament and said, look, the president is making law. Is he right to make law? ABCD, all those issues. What is the thresholds? X, Y, Z.
Let me put you on hold just for a sec. We'll continue with that point because there are two callers who have been on the line for a while. Then we'll continue with the veto. Ezekiel, good morning. Ezekiel? Ezekiel, are you there? All right, we don't appear to have him. Let's proceed.
Okay, so the issue is then, how does... So the complaint is the president, by sending back a specific amendment, say delete X or Y, is making law.
Good morning, sir.
Hello.
Hello. I actually wanted to ask the presidential advisor the question.
Let's have more volume,
and between the AG, the Attorney General, and the presidential advisor, who actually is mandated under the Constitution to advise the president on legal affairs of the country.
Please repeat the question.
I also want to ask the presidential advisor that the president has occasionally violated the Constitution. Mostly the reason one that the passing of the security law by the Parliament, then I do not understand as a public figure and a Kenyan citizen why the President with the Attorney General and the legal advisor could allow the President to sign such a bill that was passed in a more violent Parliament like that.
All right, and we will talk about that. All right, sir. So we can only take one question. I'm sorry, sir, because we are out of time. We'll only take that one question. Thank you so much for calling.
So you want me to respond to that?
Yes.
Okay, so first is between the Attorney General and say an advisor. The Attorney General is a constitutional office. It essentially the Attorney General now also is the Minister for Justice, because those two ministries were combined. The Attorney General's role is very clear in terms of the executive and in terms of lawmaking also. The President's advisor works in the presidency to support technically the President. The Attorney General is the Attorney General of the Republic, He's the principal legal advisor to government and Minister for Justice currently. On the second issue about the security laws, whether something is constitutional or not constitutional, ultimately the determination is by the courts. The security laws were passed. There were very strong views either way. There were people who had very strong views about the liberty issues. There are people who had very strong views about the security side, and we had a very difficult environment in the country at that time. That matter went to court and was litigated.
But even the idea,
yes.
one would argue,
yes.
not to get the president in a situation where he appears,
yes.
not to understand the law. Because when, yes, you say the final
yes.
decision of
yes.
legality or otherwise
yes.
is
yes.
with the court.
Yes.
But when then the
yes.
president is put in a position that he's
yes.
passed something that
yes.
the law says is unconstitutional,
yes.
then that is where the viewer's question comes in.
Absolutely.
Your
Absolutely.
role and the Attorney General,
Absolutely.
why would you allow for him to sign on something that then the court finds is wanting?
Absolutely. Sophia, 98 articles were in that bill.
Okay.
The amendments had 98 articles.
So it's a few of them.
8 out of the 98 is what the court had issues with. The other 90 had no issues.
So are you saying you dropped the ball on those 8?
No.
The legal advisors, the Attorney General, yourselves?
No, because law is not like mathematics. It's not like 1 + 1 is equal to 2. Law is interpretation. What is the current interpretation could change tomorrow. Law is very dynamic, and it's really an art more than a science. So even those, the Attorney General, I could still very strongly believe that yes,
according to you, they were okay.
Yes,
all right, we have
but
Madenge on the
ultimately,
line.
so that you have a finality,
yes.
we all say what the court says, even if I don't agree with it, is the final.
Is the final. So you
yes.
don't see it as dropping the ball.
Yes.
Madenge, good morning.
Number.
Briefly, your question, please, sir. Hello. Hello? All right, we're running out of time, so we'll move on. Let's go back to the question of
yes,
veto.
the veto, yes, yes.
Because then, and briefly,
yes.
because I mean, these are quite a number of bills here. We
but
may
bottom
not have
line
time
is about the veto
bottom
issue.
line is about the veto.
Yes, yes. So let's go to the veto issue. So the first thing is the questions are: one, when the president is sending his reservation, does he send in the form of a specific, this is my reservation, or does he say, generally speaking, I have an issue with that bill? Number one. Number two, in the event that he sends his reservations, what is the process of taking it through the House? Do you take it through the House like you have the first reading, the second reading, public participation, and finally make law, or do you take it the way it is? Those are the three main issues, the two main issues.
Right.
And in the view of, for example, the MP for Ariada, the issue was because he's saying specifically make X, and number two, because this has not been taken through the normal role of lawmaking, therefore this is the president making legislation outside the law, and in any event he doesn't have those powers.
Right.
My answer is number one, the president has a very serious role in legislation. There really cannot be law without the president acting or not acting.
Right.
Number two, when he says I have this reservation, the reservation is not about sending a love letter, it's about amending a particular section of that's the only way you can have a reservation.
Yeah, but should he be the one
problem.
amending? Do I say I have a problem? Do I say I have a problem and this is how I want that problem fixed?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So you can either say I have a problem and I want this problem fixed this way, or say I have a problem, please fix it. Now,
So
which
what?
one is more efficient? Because both in the Constitution have no problem. The president could say I have a problem with the issue about media independence, or the president could say I have a problem with the issue of the media, and this is the way I want it fixed. It comes to Parliament. Now Parliament can decide, generally speaking, you have a problem, we have covered your problem. Where does it come to? It comes to the president. He says, no, you haven't fixed my problem, go fix it again. Very inefficient. As opposed to, I have a problem with X and I want it fixed like this.
But don't you want to
Yes.
then leave it to the first one? You call it inefficient,
Yes.
but then
Yes.
one would argue that
Yes.
taking it back to Parliament to then decide how to fix the problem,
Yes.
because it is their role, that's how it should work. Because
That
when
is
the
a- that is a
president,
mistake.
in
That is a
trying to
mistake.
tackle this efficiency issue,
No.
the president says, I have a problem and this is how I want it fixed, then he appears to be taking on that
doesn't
legislative
appear, he
role.
has a legislative
He
role.
does, but
Yes.
it is limited. It is not
Absolutely.
to then come up
Absolutely.
with the law.
So what has Parliament done? Parliament, through the Speaker and the technical service in Parliament, have considered this issue. What have they come to the answer? That nothing stops both sides. In the event that it comes and we want his amendment in a manner that we like but which covers generally what he's talking about, we'll amend it. And they have done that. In the EACC case, they have done that. This is not something true only in Kenya. It happens in many countries. It has been, discussed, dissected in very many.
So as this is in court,
yes,
you are confident that the court will find in your favor?
The court is a different matter. I don't want us to go into the court, but I have no doubt. I have no doubt that the president has done absolutely the right thing, that the speakers of both houses have agreed with him in this matter. There are rulings. I'll send you the rulings of the speaker in June of this year.
There are seen to be jubilees, so there are those who would argue, politically speaking, then you still have the numbers that yes, when it's sent back, and others would want to have
I think there's a difference between a vote and the speaker ruling on a matter. When the speaker rules on a matter, it's usually something from the technical side of the house. They have very good public service. Where the parliament might have issues when it comes to members of parliament, but their civil service is top notch, better than the executive action.
Okay, so you're saying that from where you sit, the president has that role. He can say this is how I want a certain law to look like.
In fact, in our constitution, the president was required to say like that.
Okay, so not just to say his reservations,
because
to
Sophia, you are talking about an amendment. The president has an issue with this specific section.
Okay.
If you send it generally, he can, then it's up to parliament to decide what was he talking about, and then it's up to the speaker to determine, have we covered generally what he was talking about. Then that would go to the president, and the president would say, no, you didn't address the issue I was bringing in. It would be back and forth. It's better for the president to say, this is the way to address it. Parliament might twinkle that or actually completely reject it. Ultimately, if parliament is not happy with what the president is saying, they can override the veto.
Okay.
Yes.
Our time is running out, although on overriding the veto again, people would say it's a heavy jubilee parliament.
But you see, you really cannot decide to have it both ways. That is the way parliament is supposed to operate.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Another issue unrelated to this, I guess we'll wait to see how this plays out. On the ICC, we've seen the judges there pronounce themselves very clearly on the prayers that have been ongoing and the sentiments being made by the politicians. And the president is seen as recently having, quote unquote, an okay, saying people need to pray and all. So when you have judges, because this is partly legal, and the other people who should be telling the president maybe stay away from this. So when he comes out and says, let people pray, the judges are saying, yes, you're praying, but in these prayers we are hearing a lot of comments on ongoing cases.
I really won't, because of the nature of the job I do, I really wouldn't want to go into the ISIS stuff. Yes.
At all?
Yes. Generally, I keep off from openly commenting on the ISIS stuff.
All right. Then I will take you to after the Garissa attack and the leader of majority, flanked by several leaders, including yourself, came out and announced to Kenyans that there was a list that was going to be released in a number of days. It was 30 days he gave.
Remind me to congratulate your research department again.
Oh gosh.
They've done a good job.
Yeah, so 30 days and and everybody was waiting.
Yes.
And then after that time lapsed, he came out and said there was, so by you having been behind him at the time, you are seen as among the people who are saying, we know who these terrorists, financiers and all are.
What happened was we were in a very difficult situation. The country was, we had lost almost 150 young people, and we were at the risk of clearly splitting the country on religious lines, and Kenyans were fed up, and they had the right to be seriously fed up, because time and again these thugs were coming to target non-Muslim Kenyans specifically to light that fire, and if once it was lit, it would be the gates of hell. It would have been very difficult to stop. So we really had to go the extra mile. We had to really look for extraordinary ways of handling that issue. We went, after that, we went to every constituency in northern Kenya, talked to chiefs, women, religious leaders, ABCD. So one of the key issues that came up in those discussions is the public coming to say, look, when we bring information, that information, because of corruption, because of X, Y, Z, never gets to the way it's supposed to go. Number two, sometimes even that, giving that information is risky, because those guys come and actually, in one or two instances, come for the person who had given that information. So our view was, we really needed a method to bring those, and the political leaders, later on hotlines in the security sectors, were the key people to send to, other than making certain other reforms like sending Swale. So that was the issue, that we would be repositories, the political leaders would be repositories of those names. If your problem was you were not able to take this name to a certain place.
So are you then saying that people never submitted names?
They did.
And
they did.
And the names were?
Through the security sectors. Now saying...
then why in the first place come and make this public proclamation? Because what appeared to be is that we know these financials, we know these terrorists, and we will let you know.
Yeah, I think it would be unreasonable to say that a particular member of parliament knew Sophia was a terrorist, financing terrorists, and was just sitting waiting for them to do something.
But that is what the leader of majority communicated on that day.
I think then it was really a problem with communication, as opposed to, I doubt whether the leader of majority would sit and say, I know X is coming to attack my constituency and kill very many people, and I'm not going to say so. I think that was really miscommunication, as opposed to there is the perception that there's a lot of information out there. There are people who are known by the community. They don't know where they have to take those names, and will take that responsibility. And I know they sent quite a number of, quite a bit of information the other way. And I think things are working a little bit better now.
Before we conclude, I must ask you about the Okoa Kenya. We saw they have gone through the process of their signatures. They will be submitting to the IEBC. I don't know if you've had a chance to go through the proposals they have, but if you have, is there any part of the changes they propose you agree with to the Constitution?
First of all, my issue, the Constitution allows for a popular amendment of the Constitution. So long as the process, they have a right. Just like the people of Makueni had that process, the processes are constitutional. My issue would be timing, really. We are 20 months to the next election, exactly 20 months to the next election. And running a referendum this close to that election, in my opinion, would, especially looking at our finances, would be unnecessary. So I think that the best thing would be, since you're going for an elections, would you want to utilize this? That's one. Number two is, one of the reasons we did well in the last reform process with the Constitution was, to a large extent, it was not political. In other words, it was not political football. The war on corruption now has become political football. That's really one of the reasons why we're not succeeding. Before the last round, the constitution reform process had really become political football. One would say X or Y depending on where they are in the political side, and ask a number of our members in the Senate what their views were about the Senate when they were in PNU, which did not want a Senate. But so my view is, I hope this can be delinked from the political football game, and we can look at if they are genuine. Do you feel there are any that are genuine, that are merit? The Constitution needs a number of tweaking in. For example, I'll give you one of the examples. On the role of the IG and the Police Service Commission, there's a bit of a, it's not very clear on certain issues. For example, on the human resource issues, it would be nice to go back and clarify those. And there are a number like that. A member, losing their seat because of 8 sittings instead of 8 consecutive sittings. 8 sittings can be missed many times. So there are a number of items, and there are also larger foundational issues. But it would be nice to do it outside the political cycles, and for this particular issue, it would be nice to do it during the election. So given the things we've discussed this morning and the state of the nation as we stand, and we've seen those impeachment talks against the president, do you understand and see where those that are calling for impeachment are coming from, based on some of the decisions, some of the legal I think mistakes? No, I think we have major issues as a country. But we also are a very cynical country. We are a very cynical country. We usually look at the cup half empty as opposed to half full. We have many things going for us as a country. The economy has issues. We have issues with corruption, no doubt about it. Those need to be addressed. But we're in a good place. We have undertaken a complete revamp of our institutions. They face challenges, judiciary, parliament, all of them. But the cup is really more half full than empty. And those challenges will always exist. It's really to use them as stepping stones as opposed to stumbling blocks.
All right,
Yes.
well said. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Bye.
That is the Senior Advisor to the President on Constitutional and Legal Matters, Abdikadir Mohamed, with us on the Person of Interest. Unfortunately, our time has run out. Really, so much more to talk to him about, but we thank you for the time you spared for us this morning. That's it for Morning Express today. Thank you so much for watching. In the next hour from 8 a.m., which I think we're already way past, or just almost there, we'll have the news hour. So I welcome you to join us as we update you on the stories that are making headlines, not only here in Kenya, but beyond. Stay with us.